Well, thank you for joining us for today's Lunch and Learn Budgeting 201. I'm Greg Berry, Assistant Director in the UAB Office of Alumni Affairs. Since this is a virtual event, please excuse any glitches that may happen. And if you happen to have video or audio issues, click the Reconnect button at the top of your screen. This will get you back to the webinar right away. Today's session is part of our ongoing Backpacks to Briefcases Evergreen program. This new series will have 4 events each year, 2 in the spring and 2 in the fall. Topics will focus on financial planning, personal branding, workplace skills, and personal life. Between each event, there will be chances to take advantage of golden electives like today's Lunch and Learn. These events will also include networking and volunteer opportunities. To receive your Evergreen certificate and your Evergreen lapel pin, you have to complete all 4 Evergreen events, not sequentially. They can be out of place, but you do have to do each of the 4 tracks as well as 2 golden electives. These don't have to happen during the same calendar year even. Just jump on in and join us at any time. So you can get more information online for this at alumni.uab.edu/backpacks. At the end of today's Lunch and Learn, I will highlight other upcoming opportunities for the Evergreen Certificate program. Today, we welcome Abbi Gargus. Abbi is a marketing specialist at Legacy Credit Union here in Birmingham. In 2014, she graduated from UAB with degrees from the School of Education and College of Arts and Sciences. At this time, I would like to turn things over to Abbi. Welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning.
All right. There we go. I was like, I don't see my slides. Like Greg said, I am Abbi. I work at Legacy. Before I was in marketing, I was actually in the collections department. So I take a special interest in budgeting and the financial literacy and education of everyone around us. I feel like a lot of people needed that and they did not have that product available out there that was easily accessible. So today we're going to talk a little bit about that. If you were in the webinar a few weeks ago with Gina Kennedy, she did go over some great basic budgeting tips. A few of these are here. She talked about how important it is to establish a written budget. Find a method that works for you, whether that's the envelope method, using Google Sheets, a budgeting app, etc. Finding something that works for you and your lifestyle. We discussed tracking expenses and going back and looking at those expenses. We're going to look a little bit more at that today. Weighing your income and expenses. Obviously, we want your income to be higher than your expenses are. If not, we need to make some adjustments. Identify spending leaks like insurance plans, cell phone, cable packages, subscriptions that we don't use. And the most important thing she talked about was keeping your budget and financial goals smart. So that means you want to keep things specific, measurable, adjustable, realistic, and timely. And that's another one that we're going to touch on today. So getting started, let's just say this is a really good quote. A good financial plan is a roadmap that shows us exactly how the choices we make today will affect our future. And I think a lot of times we forget about that. It's really easy to say, well, retirement is 20, 30, 40 years off. I don't have to worry about that now. My child is only an infant. I don't need to worry about a college fund for that. But those things sneak up on us, and the best way that we can be prepared is to start preparing now. I don't think you can ever prepare for big financial decisions like that too early. All right, so the things we're going to go over today are just how to review and adjust your budget, how emergency funds and sinking funds impact your budget, and how paying off debt is a form of saving. So let's start with how to make adjustments in your budget. It's not enough to just go in, fill out your income, fill out your expenses, get a budget on paper or in an app, and then track your spending and never look at it. That's not beneficial to you. That's not going to help your finances. That's not going to help you meet any goals. It's kind of an all-encompassing thing. First, you have to start. You have to make your budget. You have to continually track what you're spending, your expenses, your income, all of those things. You have to set your goals. But then the key part that a lot of people forget to do is you've got to go back and you've got to look at what you spent, what you made, etc., and make those adjustments. It's really easy to just say, I don't need to do that, but it doesn't help us to track all these things if we don't utilize and look at what it's telling us. So to start, I did just use a Google Sheet. for an example of a budget. And if you did take Jenna's seminar, I know that was only 1 to 2 weeks ago. So if you just started your budgeting journey then, you're not going to have 1 to 2 months of expenses to look at, and that's totally fine. You can revisit this after a few months when you have been able to track a few months worth of your budget. But today, let's just say you have been tracking that. I want you to pay special attention to the expenses category and where you've got the difference. And you're going to see some negative numbers and some red numbers. So if we're looking at our budget, those are the places that we went through and there's an issue. We spent more than we had allotted for that specific category. And typically that means one of two things. We're either overspending or we're under budgeting. And sometimes it's a little difficult to figure out which one that is, but that's okay. We're going to talk about that. If a category is constantly in the red, you're spending more than you allotted for that category, it's really important that you go back and you adjust your budget or you adjust your spending. One of those two things has to happen. It's not just going to magically change. You're going to have to make a change. So for instance, recently, you might see that you've allotted a certain amount for gas. It normally takes you $25 to fill up your tank. You fill up once a week, so roughly 4 times a month. And lately, you've been spending a lot more than you have allotted for that. And you can't figure out why. You're not doing anything. You're not driving around town just to sightsee, but you were spending more. Well, that means you need to go back and you need to adjust your budget. This is probably an issue of under budgeting. It's not that you're doing anything different. It's not that you're spending too much money. It's that gas prices have gone up and your budget does not reflect that. So instead of $25 to fill up your tank, it may be $30 or $35. So you need to go back and say, okay, I need to use that adjustable category in the SMART budgeting plan, and I need to make adjustments and see how much I'm spending in gas and make a change to that planned expense for that category. A place where you might see some overspending a lot of times is eating out. You know, you budget $100 to eat out for the month, and then it's the end of the month and you've spent $50 or $75 more than you budgeted. You might go back and see that, well, this day I forgot my lunch, and this day I was really tired, so I stopped for Starbucks, and this day my friends called, so I went to a nicer restaurant than I usually would have. And all those little things add up, and they add up quickly if we're not paying attention to them. This would be an example of overspending. Okay, nothing external made you go to all these restaurants, forced your hand at that. You probably have groceries at home and you didn't want to cook them. You didn't make your coffee. You forgot it on the kitchen counter. And there's nothing wrong with that, but that's a really easy way that our budget can get out of hand. So for this scenario, that's an overspending problem. The budget is where it needs to be, but our spending habits don't match up with that. So in that case, it's not that we need to change the budget, it's that we need to change our habits. We need to look back and say, maybe I need to cut out fast food for lunch, and I need to cut it down to once a week and keep it under $10 in order to stay into my budget. And if I want to go to a fancier restaurant that might cost me $20 or $30, then I'm going to have to skip some of those fast food outings. And that's totally okay. Another area that you want to look at are categories that consistently have extra money in them. So, for example, it's not on this sheet, but entertainment. You might have budgeted $150 in entertainment for each month, and then you realize that you've only spent $25 and you have all this extra money in that category. Well, that's because in 2019, you probably did spend $150 a month going to concerts, going to the movies, going to different festivals and things like that, you had admission costs, you had all kinds of things. But in 2020 and 2021, not so much. So you can look at that and say, okay, I've got this money sitting here. It's not going to any use because I'm not utilizing this category. So maybe I need to look at that and I need to lower what I've allotted for that category and make that change. So revert back to your budget again and lower that allotted amount. And then you've got that extra money. And here's the good thing about that. Extra money in your budget can be put to better use elsewhere. For example, you can use it in your savings and you can use it to start paying down debt. And that's a really good thing to look at when you're looking at your budget moving forward, when we're going to talk about saving and ditching debt, is seeing how much extra do you have just sitting there that's not being utilized. So you've got your budget down, you're tracking it, you're putting your expenses in each month, you're looking at it every month, or maybe you're a person who can do that every week and, course correct as you're going. What do you do now? What do you do with all this information? How do you use it, and why is it important? Well, what you do next is you start saving for the expected and the unexpected, and then you look to ditching your debt. Saving for the expected and the unexpected. You may say, how do I save for something that I don't expect? Well, we don't know when things are going to happen, and we don't know how they're going to happen, but we know inevitably something is going to happen that we did not plan for. So when we talk about savings, we need to think about that. A few things to remember when we're talking about savings is that you need to include a saving component in your budget. So many people forget that money doesn't just go into your savings account. It doesn't just appear. It doesn't just hop over there without you doing anything. You've got to be proactive in making sure that you put the money aside, you make goals, you decide how much is good for you, and you move that money. This is a key component to your budget staying on target and your financial goals staying on track as well. So we're going to talk about two main categories that you should have within your savings today, and that's emergency funds and sinking funds. So these areas are readily available savings. So what that means is if an emergency happens, you don't always have the luxury of time to look at your investments and move money around there, sell off stocks. Or you don't want to go to something like a CD or a money market and take money out where there could be penalties and fees, or you might lose the interest because it's not time for that money to be released. So these funds are readily available savings. They're going to be in an accessible savings account. So the first one are emergency funds. And the amount you want to save in your emergency fund is going to be based on what you feel comfortable for your family. So if you're a family of one, you're probably not going to need as much. If you're a family of four, you're probably going to need a little bit more. If you're a family of four and all four are drivers, you're definitely going to need a little bit more. But a good start is $1,000 to $1,500. And this is going to cover anything like a small emergency. So the stuff that we can expect is going to happen eventually, and call it a bad day. But it's things like somebody fell and you have an emergency room copay that you didn't expect. You ran over a nail and you have to get a new tire. Or maybe it's that you have to get 2 new tires to make sure everything's going evenly. The AC goes out or the heat freezes up and you have to call a repairman out. These are things that $1,000 doesn't seem like that much or a lot, but if you have a very tight budget, it can derail your financial plans and your budget in just that one instance. So having this $1,000 or a little over $1,000 or even more if you've got a larger family is really important to helping you stay on track with financial goals. And what we would want you to do is for you to look at your finances and go, okay, I would like to have my emergency fund in my savings account within 6 months. So you would take that $1,000, the amount you want, whatever the amount is, divide it by the time frame, in this case 6 months, and then that amount that you come out with is what you need to contribute to your savings account each month. And it doesn't have to be that this happens immediately. It may be that your budget is a little more tight, so it's going to take you a full year to get to that point, and that's totally okay, because as soon as you start, you're better off than you were the day before. As soon as you make your first deposit to the savings account, you're a little bit better than you were without anything in it. So don't get all caught up in, oh, it's not happening fast enough. That's okay. But once you get that emergency fund in there and you met that goal, the next thing you would want to look at would be aim for 3 to 6 months worth of expenses. And we're not talking income because, like we said before, we want your expenses to be less than your income. So you don't have to make up the full amount of your income, just your expenses. And what this is for is, as we saw in 2020, so many people lost their jobs. They lost their income. And it was a different circumstance. So there were some other things in play with stimulus checks and the unemployment amount getting raised. But that's not always going to be the case. And it may be that you lose your job and you don't have anything else to help you out. So aiming for 3 to 6 months worth of expenses in your savings account could be just the thing you need to save you and to keep your head above water. And you do that the same way that you would with the $1,000 or whatever your emergency fund is. And you take that amount. So if you have three months is what we're going to start with. So start with 3 and then we'll build up to 6. You're going to take the amount of expenses you have for that 3 months and you're going to divide it out. Now, please note, these are not going to be quick goals. I don't know about y'all, but I can't just come up with 3 months worth of expenses in a few days. It's going to take quite a while because I do still have the monthly expenses that I'm working on currently. So it may be that you say it's going to take me a year to get 3 months worth of expenses saved up in my savings account. That's totally fine. You would take your lump sum for 3 months, divide it out by 12, and that's the amount that you should be putting in that savings account each month to make sure that once you get to that point, you got 3 months worth. And then maybe you continue on for the next 3 months. And by this time, one would hope that if you were without a job, you might not have found the job that's right for you, but hopefully you would have found some source of income to help supplement you along the way. But having the emergency fund and having the savings, the 3 to 6 months worth of expenses saved up could be something that could keep you out of some serious trouble with your finances. Having that in there can stop you from having to take out loans or put things on high interest credit cards that only ends up putting you in a worse spot in the end, even when you do get your job back or even after you get whatever the emergency was fixed and paid for. So that's what we call our emergency funds. And if we needed to dip into that, we could because it was there. And one thing to remember is, I have to tell myself this, you define what constitutes an emergency. So for me, I have things come up, my car might break down or, something happens and I'm like, oh, we don't have this money in our checking account. And then I remember, well, it's in your emergency fund. And I think, but is this really an emergency? Should I touch that money? Should I not? You constitute what is an emergency for you. Now, that doesn't mean that getting your nails done and you don't have the money in your account should be an emergency, but it is okay to use your emergency funds. That's what they're there for when you do have a true emergency. The next part of readily available savings that we want to talk about are sinking funds. And a lot of people have never heard of this concept. But sinking funds are funds that help you plan for smaller expenses that you know are going to come up, but aren't part of your monthly budget. For instance, some examples of sinking funds are birthdays. Every year, the people that you give birthday presents, they're going to have a birthday and you know the date. If you celebrate Christmas and you do gifts, Christmas is going to come at the same time every year. Some things people might forget are things like HOA expenses, car tags, property taxes come once a year if it's not an escrow. Some other smaller issues are things like quarterly garbage bills. It may only be $25-$30, but you get that bill and you think, gosh, I forgot about that. Yeah, I can pay that, but it would have been great to know that was coming up. Having sinking funds allotted helps you stay on your budget while you also plan for expenses you might otherwise forget. So if you've got car tax coming up or property taxes, which it's a little bit larger sum, it's really easy to set that out. And there is in the resources tab, there is a spreadsheet that you can do this for. You list all of that out. You list what it's going to cost and when you need that money by. So for us, we have to pay car tags in May. And then I like to have our Christmas stuff all in our account by like July or August, so we can shop early if we need to. So you take it and you say, this is my goal when I want all of this saved. And you do the same thing you did with the emergency fund. You take the amount you need, you divide it by how long you have to save, and that's how much you need to contribute monthly. And I know that can be a lot when you're thinking, okay, I've got to save up for my emergency fund. And then after that, I'll work on my expenses. And then after that, I'll work on my sinking funds. But it's a lot easier to do it and put pen to paper ahead of time than it is to catch yourself where you've had a flat tire, you had to buy a new tire, Christmas is coming up, and you didn't have any of that money saved. Then you're really deep in the hole and you're not really sure how to get out. And that could have been avoided if you looked at your budget and utilized these tools on the front end instead of looking at it from the back end. And you can also, if it's easier for you, you can have 2 savings accounts. You can have your emergency funds in one and your sinking funds in another. But I would highly recommend with the sinking funds having a spreadsheet so you know this isn't all an emergency fund in here. Some of this stuff is allotted for things already. One good thing you can utilize a sinking fund for as well is for something like if you know you've got an older refrigerator or you've got that refrigerator and all of your other appliances are stainless steel, and that one is sticking out like a sore thumb. You don't like the way it looks. It works fine though, so you can't really justify going and dropping a couple $1,000 on a new one. You can set up a sinking fund for that and say, okay, I would love to have a new refrigerator by next year. And it's going to cost me this much, and maybe I can get it for a deal, so maybe less, but I'm going to go ahead and start putting a little bit aside each month so that by the end of this year, I can purchase that new refrigerator and not have guilt about it because I planned for it and I saved for it. Once you talk about your savings and you get your savings in line with your budget and you make sure that there's a saving component in your budget, you can look again at what you've got left over, if there's anything left over, and see what you can do to pay down debt. And one important thing I want you to hear is paying down debt is a form of saving. Okay. Some people think I don't want to throw anything extra at it. I don't have the extra money. It's going to cost me. Paying down those debts early is a form of savings because it can save you money in the long run. So let's talk a little bit about debt. A lot of people have a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, a lot of anxiety when you talk about debt. It's a very taboo subject. People don't want to talk about it. Even if they don't understand and they might need help, they're scared to vocalize that. So let's get a couple things out of the way. There is a general consensus that you might hear that there are forms of good debts and bad debts. And don't let that scare you. Good debts are debts that add value to your life, and that can be in the form of an increase in net worth or an income generating tool. So a couple examples of good debts would be student loans. Paying for your education opens up doors for employment and higher salaries. So that is going to be an increase for you. Also things like mortgage and real estate investments. So typically your mortgage is your value of your house is going to increase unless something crazy happens with the market. And your investments, you're going to get money back from those, or if you're renting properties, people are paying you back. So that is an income generating tool, and people consider those good debts. Now, on the other hand, bad debts aren't things that are bad. You shouldn't have them. It just means that these are used to pay for things that lose value over time and do not contribute to your income. And a lot of times these types of debts also come with high interest rates. So some examples of bad debts are credit cards, specifically store credit cards where your interest rate is 25%, or something like an auto loan. Every time, everybody knows once you drive a car off a lot, it depreciates in value. If you've had it for a year, the value has significantly depreciated. But you've also got to think about, yeah, that might be a quote bad debt, but do you need a car? We live in Birmingham. We don't have the luxury of an awesome mass transportation system like a lot of other larger cities do. So it's pretty important that unless you live in walking distance from your place of employment, that you're going to need a car. And so don't get too caught up on the good debt, bad debt generalizations. The things you need to worry about most or consider most are 2 things. 1, do you need it? So you probably do need that car if you don't already have one to get to and from your job, to get to and from other obligations. But do you need the $40,000 brand new SUV that's a 2021 and just came out? Probably not. Do you want it? Well, of course. And that's totally fine to want it. But you need to look at, do I need this? Do I need that specific model that comes with that specific price tag? And leading into that, the second thing you need to consider is, can you pay it? I don't know about y'all, but I can't afford a $40,000 brand new 2021 SUV. And that's totally fine. I'm not in a financial place in my life where I can walk up and comfortably say, yes, let me finance this and have a $500 to $800 payment each month because I wanted something shiny and I wanted my dream car at 28. So what you need to consider is, okay, if I need it, how can I make it that I can pay for it? And with a vehicle, for example, you can say, okay, if I get a vehicle that's a few years older with low mileage and is reliable, I can save a lot of money on what I'm financing and my monthly payment and still get what I need from this car. And then I can put it in my plan to know that I want my dream car in 3 years or 4 years or 10 years. And I can go ahead and start putting a little bit back so that when that time comes, I can feel comfortable saying, you know what, I've paid off a bunch of other things and it's okay if I have one large payment to get my dream car. Or maybe you've saved up enough that you can walk in and you can pay cash for it. And if so, that's really awesome for you. So let's talk about some other types of debts that we might have that aren't in that good debt, bad debt category. Emotional debts are something that you may not have heard of, but you may want to look at first when you're looking at what debts do you start to pay off. And emotional debts are just something that weigh heavily on you mentally and emotionally. So when we talk about that, we're usually talking about something like you had something unexpected come up and you didn't have the money in your savings account for a car repair. And so your mom or your grandmom stepped in and they said, you know what, we'll pay for this. Don't worry about it. Don't get stressed out. We'll pay for it. And you pay us back when you can. Well, that seems harmless enough. That seems like they're being exceptionally generous and caring, but a lot of us have far too much pride to accept that or accept it without that weighing heavily on us. It's not because they've told us, I'm going to charge you interest and this is the monthly amount you need to pay, but it's because we feel bad having to accept help from someone we love because we know that's money out of their pocket. That's totally okay. If you are in a situation like this, you don't have to worry about the guilt of this, and you can say, you know what, it may not be the financially on paper the most logical thing to pay this first because mom's not charging me interest. She said I can pay it back whenever, but I don't want to be that kid who never pays mom back. So set yourself a goal to pay off these debts first. That way you'll be in a better place emotionally, and you won't have that lingering in the back of your head, avoiding mom at family gatherings, like, oh, I owe her money and she's going to hate me. Take care of these things first, and that'll just be another weight lifted off of your shoulder. All right, so let's talk about some different methods for ditching debt. So this is, and you might say, how do I pay anything extra on my debt? It all goes back to when you look at your budget and you see what's left over after you've done your monthly expenses, after you've calculated your savings, see what's left over and say, okay, I might have $20 that every month is still in my bank account. So that $20 is what you're going to use to start with, to start paying a little bit extra on your debt. Like I said with the savings, it does not matter how small. It's the fact that you are starting and you are continuing to do that is important, no matter the dollar amount. So, Snowball Method. This is a very widely known method that a lot of people use. And the theory behind this is that you pay down your debts in order of balance amount. So you start with your smallest debt and then you build up to the largest balance for your debts. And if the debts do have the same balance, you put the one with the highest interest rate first. But we're focused mainly on the balance. And we pay all the minimum payments for all of our debts because that's required. But then we throw all the extra money we have at this balance this debt with the lowest balance. So then we go, as we pay that one off, we take that payment and the little extra amount that we threw, and we throw it to the next debt with the next smallest balance, so on and so forth. The benefit to this debt is quick satisfaction, okay? This method is something that those people who have a really hard time sticking with something might want to utilize. If you're the type of person who's like, I did this for 5-10 days or 5-10 months, and I'm really not seeing a ton of results, Snowball Method is going to be for you, because since you're starting with the smallest balance, you're going to start paying off debts a little bit quicker in the beginning. So this method is for some quick satisfaction. I need some immediate something to get me going. Oh, okay. Well, I paid that debt off and I feel good. Now I can go to the next one. But there's a downside to that. So the Avalanche Method talks about paying debts off in order of interest rate. So we know that interest can get you, and it just sneaks up on you, and you're like, hold on, I paid $300 and only $100 of it went to principal and the rest of it went to interest. If you've ever looked at your student loan debts, I know you can relate to that, and you're just staring, and you're like, how did we get here? So the Avalanche Method is going to start with your highest interest rate, the debt with the highest interest rate, and then work down to the debt with the lowest interest rate. We focus on pay our minimum payments, and then we focus on paying off that balance that has a crazy high interest rate. For example, if you have a store credit card for somewhere like Belk or JCPenney, those interest rates are crazy high. So the balance may not be that large, but the interest accumulating on it is. So by starting with the highest interest rate and going down, it may take a little bit longer initially to see debts getting paid off. But in the end, you're going to pay off your debts quicker, and you're going to pay off your debts with less. It's going to take less money because you're going to be paying less interest along the way because you were strategic about handling, okay, I'm going to get this one with a 20% interest rate first, then I'm going to go to the one with the 12, then I'm going to go down to the one with the 3 that's not collecting as much interest. The benefit to paying off your debts like this is that you pay them off faster in the long run and you pay less interest. So this is what we're talking about when we say paying down debt is saving. So no matter what method you choose, paying anything extra is saving you money in the long run. But you've kind of got to look at what fits your lifestyle. For me, I don't know if anybody's ever heard of the experiment where they set a child in a room with a marshmallow and they said, you can eat this marshmallow now, or if you wait for 15 minutes, we'll bring you 2 marshmallows. So you'll have 2 instead of 1. And seeing about delayed gratification. I am that person. I would much rather say, okay, I can see the big picture and I can pay this debt with the highest interest rate now, even though it may be a little bit longer before I see my first debt fully paid off. If you were the kid that would say, I want the marshmallow now, I cannot wait for the second one, I don't care about the second one, this one's here and I want it, then you probably are the type of person who would benefit from the Snowball Method because you're going to see those results a little bit quicker. So how does this look when we actually put it into a budget or into a calculator to reduce our debt? So here I've got 2 different the same debt calculator, but with 2 different methods listed. This is by Vertex 42. You can Google it. It is on the resources tab. I absolutely love it. I am so bad at math. I hate it. It was always something that I thought was like, okay, I can't figure out money because I can't do the math right. It's too difficult for me. This does all the math for you. Now, if you look at the numbers I've got put in here, they are completely arbitrary. They are made up. It's what came with this table, and I did not change them, but props to you if you have an auto loan with a $30 payment and a $50 payment. That's great. But it just shows you the 2 different methods. And so you go in and you plug in all your different debts. You plug in their balances, their interest rate, their minimum payment amount. And then what it's going to do, it's going to give you the total of their balances. It's going to give you the total payment amount that you have to make. And so this is where you go, okay, for this example, the total payment amount is $270. But you've got $530 extra in your budget that's not accounted for. It's not going to food, gas, it's not going to any expenses. You're saving like you should. What do you do with this money? Because it's not really doing you much good sitting in your checking account. Well, you take that and you go, I could use this to pay some extra on my debts. So you take that amount that you have and you'll plug it into this monthly payment tab and it'll tell you your initial snowball. And then you see the tab that says strategy. This is where you can pick a drop-down menu, and there are other methods other than Snowball and Avalanche listed. You can do a custom method, which you might want to do if you owe mama that $1,000. You might want to do a custom method for a little bit until you get that paid off and say, I want to pay this debt off first. But you can do the drop-down menu, and then it will automatically reorder the debt's in the bottom here, and it'll tell you how much you're paying in interest on each individual debt, how many years it'll take to pay them off, and then the month and year that it's going to be paid off. And then at the bottom, it will calculate the total interest paid. And what we're aiming for here is lower is better. So if you can do the Avalanche method and stick with it, that's definitely what I would recommend. But like I said, any extra that you're paying is a step in the right direction. So here we see that if you went with the Snowball method, it's over $5,000 in interest paid. But if you went with the Avalanche method, it's just over $4,000 in interest paid. So the difference in that is over $1,000. Now, like I said, these numbers are a little bit arbitrary. They're kind of just out there made up, probably not very reflective of what your situation looks like. So it may be that you plug your stuff in and you go, well, this says I only save $50 in interest. I don't know about you, but $50 to me is $50. That's $50 that I can use on something else, or $150. So it'll depend kind of how your debts are laid out, how your interest rates are laid out. For my family, it worked out that our interest rate aligned with our lowest balance. So our highest interest rate was also our lowest balance. So it was both Snowball and Avalanche. It didn't matter which calculation we put in, it was the same how the numbers worked out, which is a little bit different and kind of unusual, but so it didn't matter what we put in there as long as we were making those payments and doing a little bit more to pay off our debt. This is, like I said, I highly recommend this. It's a great way to play around and not have to do all the calculations and not do the legwork. And if you go into this sheet on Google Sheets, it has a second page and it's going to give you a list of every single payment you're going to make when you change what you're paying for each debt. So when you pay off that first debt, that was, a $300 minimum payment and you were paying $20 extra. So then that $320 goes to the next debt. And you just continue on and then you gain speed. And that's how you're able to pay off your debts a little bit quicker. But please know, if you are one of those people that is living completely paycheck to paycheck, you've cut everything out that you can and you just cannot pay extra on your debts right now, that is okay. There is no guilt in that. There's no shame in that. You've got to do what you can do with the means that you have at the moment, and then just continue on looking for ways that you can improve that. All right, so how do you choose which method is for you? Like I said, Snowball is going to be for people who need that immediate result to stay motivated. They need to see those debts going off a little quicker in the beginning to really see that they're making a difference. Avalanche is going to be best for people who can see the big picture. They can stick something out for their long-term goals, and they don't have to have those immediate results to know that in the end, something great is there. Or a mixed method, and that's for people who might have one of those emotional debts that they feel obligated to pay off, and they want to get that off their chest. So you pay that, and then you go back in and you update it, and you change your method, and that's totally fine. All right, and I've got my resources right here. We've got the sinking funds calculator, the comparison on paying off debt, the debt reduction calculator, and then another great resource that I didn't use in this presentation is America Saves. At the end of February, they did an America Saves week. You can see all of that on Legacy social media and the America Saves social media, but I've listed some articles here that are great information articles about how paying off debt is saving, how you need to save for the expected and the unexpected, and things like that, that if you want to visit their site, you can, and they've got great resources.
And one thing I will make sure I do, I'll have Abby send me over that list, and I will put that in an email to y'all that will go out tomorrow. So you can be on the lookout for all those links. It'll probably be on the landing page, but it'll be accessed through that link. Abby, great information. We do have questions that were previously submitted and some that are coming in now. Somebody asked, what is the best method for tracking expenses? Are there apps, a website? What should people use?
Yes, so there are a large number of apps out there. Some of them are free, some of them cost money, some of them can link up to your bank account. So if you're the type of person who just wants to I don't want to do anything, but like I want the result, that is something you can do. And it pulls most of your information from your bank account transactions. For me personally, I found it easiest to use a Google Sheets because I can go in there and it makes me look and see, put every single line item in and see the discrepancies. I can see easily that, hey, I don't think I put in our insurance payment. Did my husband pay that this month? Let me go check. So yes, there are numerous apps, and you can just Google best budgeting apps because it's not a one size fits all.
So when it comes to somebody that has student loan debt, is there maybe a trick how to budget with that?
There isn't a trick. You have to work with what you have. For me, I remember when I came in my first 6 months, because I graduated in December, and I got my tax statements. I ran to my mom and I was like, this is wrong. This is wrong. So much went to interest. And she was like, oh no, you should know this. And I didn't. But to look at what your student loan payment, and I don't know everybody's personal situation. I do not recommend doing the income based because you're just going to be locked in so long, but to do the payment they assign you, and it's like any other debt. You look at it and it's a requirement that you make that minimum payment, and all your other things need to be based around that. And that might mean you don't get to go out as much, that you don't get to eat out as much, that you go to Aldi and buy Great Value brand instead of going to Publix and getting all the fancy stuff. But you have to make sacrifices. But there's no magic trick.
Yeah. So how do you convince a significant other of changes? Because two people can look at the budget drastically different.
Use the data. That's what I did. My husband was dead set on we're paying our mortgage off first. And I was like, most Americans carry a mortgage. Why would we do that? We might not even be here in 5 years, but we're still going to have all this other debt. But I did not know how to do the math. And I was like, I can't back up my theory. But then I found the debt reduction calculator, and it did all the math for me. And I laid out the numbers and I said, look, now I'm not going to say that I said I was right and you were wrong. Theoretically, I might have said that, but I said, look at these numbers. Look at what this is telling us. Look at the dates that we would get these things paid off your way versus my way. Look at the interest that we're paying. And numbers don't lie. Methods can be subjective, but at the end of the day, when we're talking budgeting, it's mostly about the numbers. So if you can get that data and sit down, I think getting somebody to come to the table with you is the hardest part, because once you put the numbers out there, it's really hard to say, no, I know that saves us money, but that just doesn't make sense. So utilize the data.
Do you recommend debt consolidation?
It really depends on your situation, but with my experience working in collections, it's a lot of promising you the moon and the stars, and that's not what you get. It just depends. Some debt consolidation companies are reputable, and you can take all of these things, and one payment may be more manageable for you. If you're the type of person who forgets payments and it's ending up that you're getting late payments and late fees and late marks on your credit, then absolutely look into that, do your research, and it might be a lot easier for you to make one payment to one company a month. But also, before you go to that, I would encourage you to talk with your individual creditors. See what they can do, see if they can change payment amounts, see if you could do, like if it's credit cards, balance transfers, look for a low rate on that. But that would not be my first option, but it's completely subjective to your individual situation.
Is there any way somebody can pay the principal first on student loans?
Not to my knowledge. Depends on how your student loans are accruing interest also, but every student loan I've ever seen, you have to make it automatically does it. It takes your interest out of that payment you make. Now, once you've paid all that interest and your monthly payment has been made, you can go in and make a principal only payment or allocation, but that is after. But right now, good news, bad news, if you have federally held student loans, they are probably in forbearance, and they are probably stuck at 0% interest for the time being. So if you wanted to make a very large dent in them and that was the only debt, you could throw all your extra money at that for the time being, and you're going to get a lot further along than you would when it is accruing interest.
When is the earliest you would suggest paying off student loans without it damaging your credit?
There's not really a time frame. I will tell you that student loans, they don't impact your credit as fast as some other forms of debt as far as making your score go up. So, I go by, you've probably had them since you were a freshman and they've been accruing since then. So if you are one of those lucky people that you graduate and you have a killer job with an amazing salary and you have the means to start paying off as much as you can, do that. Because other things are going to come up when that account closes that you're going to have to open up a mortgage account. You're going to have other lines of credit that are opened, but definitely do what you can as far as paying them off early. And I wouldn't worry so much about the tiny tick you're going to get in your credit score when you pay something off.
What are ways to invest or save money with high interests?
What do we mean when you've got high interest?
I would say that you're probably putting your money in something that's going to yield at a higher interest than normal.
Oh, okay. Yeah, if you've got extra money, we didn't talk about CDs or investments because Gina touched on that a little bit. That's not exactly the wheelhouse that I'm super familiar with, but I will say if you've already got that savings that we talked about, the readily available savings, and you've got extra money because you've built that up, that you can invest in something like a CD or like investments, then absolutely do that. You don't want to get too much in your savings account that's at a super low interest rate. So once you get to that number that you want in your savings, definitely transition that over to something that does have a higher yield interest.
A retirement question. So what percentage of my check should I be saving for retirement? And if I have credit card or other debt, should I pay that off before aggressively saving for retirement?
Well, it depends. I don't know. Like I said, retirement is not the biggest. It's not my wheelhouse. But for us, I started with the idea that I wanted 10% going into my retirement. But for us, that meant our company does a match. So I didn't have to put that full 10% in. I had to put 7 or 8%, but my initial goal was 10%. And then, we've had a conversation lately that we might want to up that and we might want to make the new goal trying to get to 15%. Just because there's so many unknowns about retirement. We don't know if Social Security will still be something in play. But what I would say, if you're already employed and you are already eligible for something like a 401k, for credit unions, it's CUNA, and we have a rep. You can probably talk to somebody in your HR department, and whoever handles your 401k, whoever furnishes it, probably has a rep that's willing to sit down and do Zoom or one-on-one or group classes with you to kind of go in depth on that. And then as far as the credit card versus saving, it depends. If you have money in your budget to do a little bit of both, I would recommend that. But it's a preference. If you pay off those high interest credit cards and you're not putting something in savings and an emergency happens, well, you can look at it like you've probably got some credit line extended there that you can swipe the credit card for. For me personally, I would not feel comfortable with that. I would feel more comfortable having that money in my savings account and paying the minimum on the credit card so that if an emergency did happen, whatever I take out of my savings account, I'm not going to pay interest on in the future.
So somebody just recently started investing in the stock market using cash out. So what are the best ways to retrieve profits while minimizing any taxes?
Okay, I can't really give you a super great answer on that.
Not a problem. So what are your thoughts on online banking and high yield savings accounts?
Oh, great. Absolutely. If you've got accounts over different things, like if you're not a person who goes into a branch and that's not something that's beneficial to you, and you can do an online financial institution and it meets all of your needs, great. I definitely would say when you're looking at your financial institutions, be very aware of what it is you want to get out of that. So if it is that you want a higher yield savings account, then you're going to want to research that. If it's that you're not going to keep a ton in your savings because you just don't have enough for that, but you do swipe your debit card all the time, then it's going to be more beneficial to you to look for accounts that have greater perks on their checking and rewards and dividends on their checking than it is their savings. So nothing against online accounts or institutions. That's 100% a personal preference.
Okay. So thank you again so much for spending the last roughly hour with us to go over Budgeting 201. We look forward to future installments with Legacy Credit Union as well, including coming up on the 25th with I'm Home, how we can learn about mortgages. Abbi, thank you so much for all you do, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you.
So if you are looking for a podcast, listen in on UAB Green and Told. Every other week, we release conversations we have from members of the UAB community. UAB Green and Told can be found on Spotify and Apple Podcasts or by visiting alumni.uab.edu/greenandtold. Also, be sure to stay up to date on all things alumni through social media. We are UAB Alumni on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also look us up on LinkedIn by searching UAB Alumni Career Community. You can also email us at alumni.uab.edu or visit alumni.uab.edu. Meanwhile, here's a look at the other events that you can take part in for the Evergreen Certificate Program. On March 25th, take part in I'm Home. This virtual lunch and learn will explore what we should and shouldn't do for first-time home ownership. Then on April 14th, we'll host Backpacks to Briefcases, Build Your Personal Brand, where you can find out how to best develop your brand so it stands out in the crowd. On April 20th, be part of a resume building lunch and learn as we look at ways to ensure your resume is articulating your impact and you're getting the jobs you want. And finally, on April 29th, join us for another virtual lunch and learn interview skills as we learn how to master the art of the interview. Get more information on the entire Evergreen program or register at alumni.uab.edu/events or alumni.uab.edu/backpacks. Looking to get out of the house? Join us for a 15th annual scholarship run presented by Viva Health. Our virtual run will go from Friday, April 23rd through Monday, April 26th, and has 5K, 10K, and of course, non-running options. Why not, right? You can register for all of these by going to alumni.uab.edu/5K-10K or alumni.uab.edu/run. Once again, thank you so much for joining us for this afternoon's discussion with Abbi Gargus of Legacy Credit Union. Have a great afternoon, and as always, go Blazers.